Okay, guys, how do I stop white knuckling?
In your recovery, do you feel like sometimes you're just hanging on, doing the best to just hang on?
But just by my fingertips.
Yeah.
All right, welcome. We're happy you're here today, and I wanted to share a quick review that was left for us in iTunes, which we super appreciate, you guys. Every time you leave us a review or even rate us, it helps our podcast find new people that are looking for help. So this one was left just this last few days, and it says, "There's value in sharing. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective and advice. My wife and I are on a recovery journey together, and part of that is listening to an episode of your podcast together each day. Some days the content is harder and than others to talk about, but each episode is extremely enlightening and gives us an opportunity to connect and to empathize. Thank you to all three for sharing."
That's awesome. So, we work really hard to try to provide content, but we also individually, Brandon has therapy, he runs groups and so forth. Ash and I run groups. I do one-on-one as well. And here's a little success story. A guy I've been working with for, it's probably the better part of 2 years. He has just transitioned out of, he's an individual in group with me, and just transitioned out and said, my wife and I can't put into words how much you, Kobe, have helped me transition into the man, father, and husband I am today. And he's in a great place. He's really embraced recovery and he's very skilled. So we're the best thing that we can do, and I'm going to speak for all of us, is to send people out the door who've transitioned out of accountability and therapy. Yeah, that's like the best thing that we can do. This isn't a forever thing. Recovery's not. It's learn the skills, learn the knowledge that you need to go out and do it yourself. We want you to learn how to fish.
Absolutely, love it.
That's a super important part of this.
And one thing that I learned early on was, I get feedback like that about my therapy, how I'm changing people's lives and all of that. The reality is I'm not. I'm just stepping into what God has made me do, and God's working through me. And the people who have the most success are the ones who, and I've talked about this before, they're the ones that come in and they just create their own recovery. And I feel like I'm keeping my responsibility, my purpose with God, and that's all I'm doing. And they're creating their recovery, and I'm a source of information.
You're like facilitating all that.
And facilitating it, but they're doing it. So that guy's singing your praises, Kobe.
But it's all him.
Don't get your head too big, because that guy's the man, and he's creating recovery, and it's awesome.
Yes,
right?
It is his.
But you're awesome too, because you've been courageous enough to step in to be what he's needed you to be for him. And God's working through you. So love it.
100%. We definitely feel called, and it's not something we chose.
Absolutely.
There's no way. I have my hands in my head like, oh my gosh, there's no way I want to do this. I would choose.
People ask me why I do this, and I say, God wants me to do this.
Yeah.
I don't have a great story to really say why I'm here, but I know that I'm supposed to be. So, okay, so just hanging on, white knuckling. What is white knuckling? Literally, what is white knuckling?
I'll give you a real life example. So Ash and I just went on holiday, and we went through the airport, and both in Salt Lake, and then we flew to Fort Lauderdale. And airports used to be a place of torment for me. So white knuckling for me was very much about just it was just like me holding on with my fingertips. I said that in earlier,
right.
But going through the airport and seeing like a Hudson News or seeing like just a bookstore would send me physically and mentally into this tailspin, into this like vexing place of like, don't look. Oh my gosh, I'm looking. Is it there? I can see the top shelf. Do they have porn there?
So what you're describing is like you're at the airport,
walking through the terminals,
and you might even be like like walking through the terminals on purpose to find those bookstores and magazine stores just to
Accidental.
know they're there. You're going to buy a pillow, right, for the flight.
I need a water. I gotta have like some M&Ms, and I'd go into the store, and I would be like, my peripheral vision is actually pretty rad, and that didn't serve me so well actually in these particular situations, because I would literally be facing the M&Ms, but I'd be like out the corner of my eye, like looking at, especially when I would be international, right?
So, you're right,
and it was just horrible.
So the as you're passing these stores, the energy that they're like drawing you in. They're like pulsating at you. Hey, I'm here. The porn on top of the shelves or whatever in there, it's just like, I'm here, and your white knuckle is just forcing yourself to not
don't do it. I'm going to do it, but
don't do it. I don't want to do it. So
if I was to directly, like, I remember seeing a guy stand there and looking at the wall of porn in the airport one time. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he's actually facing it. I could never face it.
Interesting.
And that like put me into this like, oh my gosh. So even the idea of directly looking would freak me out. So my white knuckling,
you can just hear the amount of energy that you're giving to this. Right?
Yeah.
Like that, thinking about not going in and perusing, but not as opposed to like what I hear, Kobe, is that you're in just a place of fear,
yes,
and shame,
yes,
and you're forcing yourself not to do something bad.
Yep.
And so as you're in that place, you're also in a place of desire, in a place of wanting to numb out, and so you're forcing yourself. And sometimes you give in on that, sometimes you won't, right? But you're just hanging on.
Yep.
You're just white knuckling, literally, your knuckles turn white because you're hanging on so tight.
There's a fair amount of butt pucker with that too, I'll say, because it wasn't just
never heard that.
Oh, like clenching the cheeks, butt pucker. but
call it what you will.
Call it what you will.
We're gonna call it white knuckling.
Yeah. But Ashlyn's totally shaking her head like, oh my gosh, what are you saying? But here's what sucked about those experiences. Those experiences always took place at the beginning of a trip. It would sometimes be 2 and 3 weeks on another continent. And that epitomized the white knuckling that took place through my trips. And just looking back on it, I feel like I'm over that and I can talk about it, right? But there's still now an energy that pains me, like, wow, that was the place that I was in.
Right.
Because it would be this whole long trip of white knuckling. And so if I'm feeling that, I can't imagine what that was like for you, Ashlyn, to feel and observe. And I'm sure there's probably times where you're like, dude, who are you?
Yeah, it's interesting because in one of my groups we were talking about this. Like, how did I not notice him white knuckling for so long before we knew about, okay, this is a problem. This is an addiction. This is your brain. Oh, and this is a thing, betrayal trauma. Like, it is affecting you. You got to do something about it too. It was just us in survival mode, right? And so we were talking about how was I just so numb and so blind that I didn't notice him uncomfortable at the beach or uncomfortable at the airports and whatever. No, I noticed, and it made me anxious.
Right.
That he was anxious.
Right.
You can feel that energy, right? And so maybe I didn't know his thoughts and what was going through his head and what he was doing.
Right.
But we were definitely off.
Right.
And
I think this whole thing, the betrayed in her way, or the woman who's been betrayed in her way, she white knuckles in recovery as well in different ways. And this whole thing is based on the sobriety model of recovery, right? Is I'm going to white knuckle my way not to do a bad thing, so therefore I'll be good enough. I'm okay. I'll be lovable. And so, we said something a couple weeks ago on our episode that, if your recovery is about not doing something, then that's not real recovery. And the difference between recovery and sobriety really is this force-based thing called white knuckling, which is a sobriety model, versus real recovery, And what is real recovery?
I look at it as growth and being open and accepting change
Yes.
and who we are, discovering who we really are. Because I think for most of us, we don't.
I'll give you a real life airport example of what it was like. It was being in the airport now. Like once I just shared with you guys what it was like for me back then, but walking through the airport now, and I think I even told you this actually, whether it's Florida or here, it's like, I feel there's so much peace that comes from walking through a terminal directly past a newsstand, or even going in to get a drink and not being tormented, not being vexed in any way with what may or may not be there.
That sounds great, Kobe. That sounds fine and dandy, right? Yeah, but why doesn't everybody do that? Why don't the partners just kind of find acceptance and stop forcing things and stop controlling things?
I mean, it's a journey that I had to take. I had to go through the white knuckling. I had to grow through in order to.
You white knuckle for a reason, and it's our knee jerk reaction. It's, we feel like if we let go of control, then what's going to happen, right? Think about it. If you work your recovery from a place of surrender, a place of acceptance, a place of saying, look, I could go in that airport store and look at Playboys right now. I'm not going to force myself not to do that. Now we're left with, okay, then
what?
Then what? If you don't trust yourself, if you don't know yourself, then you're worried that you're going to go do that stuff, right? And so there's a step into the dark with all of this.
It's scary in the dark, right?
It's scary in the dark, yes. If you step into the dark, where are you going to land, right? If you step off that cliff, where are you going to land? And so it's easier sometimes to pull back in control and say, no, I'm going to force this to be this way. And that keeps you stuck. Keeps you stuck in the sobriety model. It keeps producing shame. It keeps producing fear. It keeps producing disconnection in your relationships. And the only way past that is through courage and faith. And that will push you through to say, oh my gosh, I am good. I don't need to white knuckle my way not into walking into that store right there. I'm good. I'm okay with it. I'm fine. I can accept that I want to go look at those Playboys, but I'm not going to. I'm fine, right? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so my question is, are you saying, this is what it sounds like to me, that sobriety and that white knuckle, it sounds like you're doing it on your own.
Yeah.
Right? Like you feel so alone in this battle, and it's like this constant fight.
Right.
Whereas what you described in being able to accept and to have tools to say, that's not who I am, requires more than just you.
I love that, Ashlyn. Turn your, step 3, turn your will and your life over to the care of God, where you have connection to God, you have connection to others, you accept where you're at, and you're able to surrender, you're able to let go. So if you're working your recovery and your recovery feels like a balloon that's just getting tighter and tighter and bigger and bigger, when it pops, then you're relapsing, right? Or if you're the partner, when it pops, then you're obsessing and doing all this thing to try to create safety in your relationship. Instead of popping it to get the air out, there's another way. You know the other way to get the air out of the balloon?
Untie it and
let some air out.
Yeah.
It sounds so right?
Yeah.
Open up the hole that you blew the air in and let some air out. So the point being, just deflate the energy a little bit. Let go of the fear. Let go of the pressure to try to be perfect enough. And then it's not going to pop.
It makes so much sense. I talk a lot about this with just in my own journey is I relied on willpower, which is the same thing. That's talking the same thing, right? But what I realized is that my willpower will always fail me because my willpower is not. It doesn't indicate any internal growth, and it will always fail you But what I and I tried to use that as my first line of defense. What I realized is that in recovery, it's a skill set that I have to be mindful of, real time mindful of always. And so my recovery skill set became my first line of defense. And then in intense moments, or really hard moments, my willpower can be there to be a secondary supplement. You know what I mean? To my skill set, but it's never. I mean, it's never meant to be that. It can't be that way. You can't just white knuckle it.
Right. If you're listening to this, and if you really take a step back and you realize, oh my gosh, our target here is for him to stop acting out or relapsing, and for her to try to control things so that he'll stop acting out or relapsing, then you're not going to get to where you want to get. You won't create safety in your relationship. You won't feel that foundation underneath all of it. Shame and fear produces more shame and fear. You can force sobriety for a while, but as you're forcing that sobriety, you're still breaking down the foundation of that relationship. It's done from force and fear and shame, right? The alternative is surrender. The alternative is letting go and acceptance of where you're at, right? And connecting to God and connecting to others in your recovery, and that works. So
it works for both.
Absolutely.
Because there's no way I would have been able to let go without some guidance.
Right.
Because it seemed like crazy talk. Like what you're saying, Brandon, makes sense to me now.
Right.
But in the beginnings, it sounded crazy. Like, how am I supposed to gain safety if I don't have control and know what he's doing?
No, so everything that's going on
my check-ins.
Yeah. I mean,
right?
I said it a billion times. We fought the therapist over this because I was like, that's how I'm supposed to feel safe. Is if I know he's doing all the things.
Right.
And if I know what's going through his head, that's going to make me feel safe. No, that's going to make me feel crazy.
Yes.
Yes. And so
that paradox is really hard to understand, and it does sound crazy, to say, hey, stop trying to force it, stop trying to jump in there and see every little thing that's going on. Well, what do you expect me to do then? As the woman who's been hurt and betrayed, what do you expect me to do? Should I just let him do whatever he wants to do? And the fact of the matter is the answer to that is yes. But hear me out. The answer to that is yes. Let him do whatever he's going to do. He is in control of himself. And the only way that you'll trust him is to know that he's going to man up on his own and work his own recovery. Right? You don't want to gain trust in your ability to control his recovery. You want to gain trust in him. Now, if you don't control it and he fails and he hurts you and he does all kinds of horrible things, then you come back to you and you say, okay, do I trust myself? And this comes back to our boundaries discussion, right? Mm-hmm. To say, okay, I'm at peace with myself. I accept who I am. I accept where I'm at. And I accept what's happening here with my marriage and with my husband. He's choosing his sex addiction over me right now. And so I'm going to have to make some really hard decisions. I can still have peace with where I'm at. I'm not saying you're not going to have pain.
Right.
I can still have peace with where I'm at, and I can still move forward. But to jump in and try to force him to love you, you'll never create love that way. You can't create love with fear. They're opposites. And so you got to let go of the fear and have some acceptance, love yourself, and then let the cards fall where they may. And that's the scary part of it all, right?
Can I share something really quick? One of the girls I've had in one of my groups for quite a while, she has done this where she has accepted he's going to do what he's going to do. And he's gone from, I'm going to work recovery to, I'm not going to work recovery, which is hard. That's like this grieving process that you're going to go through, right? And yet she went from showing up hurt on these calls all the time to she looks different.
Right.
She's taking care of herself. She is strong. She sounds healthy, even though she's in pain.
Right.
And it's been like the entire group, we're all noticing and we're all gaining this energy from someone who's suffering probably the most of all of us. She's empowered because of this step.
So she's not suffering, she's in pain.
She's in pain.
So there's nasty, hard stuff happening to her,
Yeah.
but she's not allowing it to turn into suffering
Right.
because she's surrendering him over, right? Like, do you? I'm
I'm going to focus on what I can control, which is
Absolutely.
me, and I'm
absolutely
going to help my kids, all this stuff. And it's really it's heartbreaking, but it's beautiful.
right
to
right,
see.
that process.
That's
Yeah.
interesting.
I love
That's
that,
really
actually.
interesting. And that's also the most, like what we're talking about with white knuckling. It was probably the most emotionally taxing and draining season. Well, 14 plus years, almost 15 years of our marriage, and for 31 years for me. Well, it was just the most draining. It was the most taxing, the most exhausting place to be in. And I know what you're talking about, and it is a beautiful thing. Like, despite the fact that she's in pain, it's an inspiring thing.
It is. It inspires all of us, which is you can't understand, I guess, until you can see it in yourself or in someone else.
And if we were to take a step back and see that her marriage is falling apart and her husband's not choosing recovery, on the outside we might say she's not in recovery.
Right.
But when you really look at it, she is.
Yeah.
And it's not about
She's doing the work.
it's not about what's happening to her. It's what she's creating through her in her life. And that's awesome. That's the opposite of white knuckling right
Yeah.
there.
It's real, tangible internal growth.
Okay, I want to give just three takeaways before we wrap up here. So number one is what's underneath white knuckling every single time is fear and shame. And shame is just the fear of abandonment, fear of rejection. So it's fear-based. You might be doing a lot of good things and white knuckling, and if you feel tension, you feel pressure, you feel this pulse like you're talking about in the airport, that's a white knuckle.
So get curious with that.
What's
that fear? You're
Get
saying,
curious. What is that fear?
what am I feeling?
And instead of trying to do something more to control it, ask yourself, what do I need to face? What do I need to look at that's real and accept and let go of? Right? There's a process to go through to let go of that. Right? What reality is there that's really hard and scary that I can face and let go of? Okay. The next thing, number two, is a white knuckle or a force-based, fear-based recovery will never create safety in a relationship. Won't happen. You can try it forever, and you'll create more disconnection and break the foundation. No matter how sober you are, I don't care how sober you are.
Agreed.
It's that energy that you were talking
Yes.
about, right?
It's the energy in a relationship. If you're bringing fear, both sides, the betrayed and the addicted, bringing fear to the table, you're going to create more of that together, which will create more separation and destroy the intimacy in the relationship. Okay. And number three, just to reiterate, the way out is through acceptance and surrender. It's a letting go process. It's not a do more process. So loosen, get a little blood in your knuckles and just loosen it and shake your hands out a little bit to realize that you're okay right where you're at today in this moment and who you are right in this moment, no matter how sober you are or not. To look at your life and look at the mess and look at the beautiful things and just accept what is right now. That's the way to not white knuckle.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
So we're going to have a Patreon deep dive on this, and that's going to talk about the framework as well as the steps that Ash and I have taken to get to this place of transitioning out of. And it's not just an on-off switch. It's a transition, and we're going to share some of the stuff that we did there. So I'd love to have you guys join us on that. Now, as far as we offered a free program last month, and we had an enormous response. We're really excited about that because the content's going to be rich. And
we sold it out in a day. Well, you
hours.
call it selling it out, but
Yeah.
It was full in hours.
Yeah,
And
we're pretty excited.
Yeah.
For
So
those who
thank
get
you
to
for that.
participate, yeah, exactly. And just know that this content will in future be available for everybody. So we're pretty excited about that, guys. Thanks for being with us. Appreciate what you do. If you have heard something that you really like here, share this episode because you never know who it can help.
All right, see you guys.